Back in the summer of 1989, a 24-year-old woman named Alberta Williams just vanished. Her body was found weeks later, and it kicked off an investigation that would go completely cold for almost 30 years. So today, we're going to look into this unsolved case and the questions that still haunt her family and really an entire nation.
Our story really starts right here, with this one tiny detail from an investigator's notebook. When they found Alberta's body, this necklace was still around her neck. It was intact. And the pendant? It spelled out a name, Dave. You know, it's such a haunting clue. It doesn't point to a killer. It points to a life that was being lived and a future that was stolen.
So before we get into the tangled web of the case itself, it's really important to know who Alberta was. Because behind all the police files and the conflicting stories, there was a real person who was loved and who was full of life.
Yeah, that necklace. That was all about her life in Vancouver with her boyfriend Dave. She was just back in her hometown of Prince Rupert for the summer to work, but she couldn't wait to get back to him, to get married, to start their life together. By all accounts, she was just incredibly happy.
When you talk to the people who knew her best, they paint this picture of someone who was gentle, kind of shy at first, but also loved to laugh and have a good time. Once you got to know her, she was super outgoing and animated. Just a good person, you know? So excited about what was next for her.
All right, so this is where the story gets complicated, really complicated. The investigation into her murder basically stalled for 27 years because it was pinned between two completely different theories of what happened on the night she disappeared.
So you've got this major split. On one side, the police were completely zeroed in on her Uncle Jack. He was one of the last people seen with her, but he was super uncooperative, just claiming he had a bad memory. But then, on the other side, you have three different witnesses telling a totally different story, that they saw her leave the bar with these unknown guys in a truck.
And you can just feel the investigators' frustration here. Gary Kerr, one of the main guys on the case, said that no matter where they looked, everything seemed to point back to one person. The problem? They had a huge list of questions, but they were getting almost zero answers. It was like hitting a brick wall.
And then you get this, which just throws a huge wrench in the police's theory. You have an eyewitness, Randy Daniels, who is absolutely certain about what he saw. This isn't some foggy memory. He's like, no, this is a fact. And it points the investigation in a completely different direction.
So this is the heart of the problem, right? After all this time, who do you believe? You've got a prime suspect who won't talk, and then you have multiple eyewitnesses telling a totally conflicting story. This one question is pretty much why Alberta's case went cold for so long.
But, you know, this isn't just about the facts of a cold case. Behind all of the police work and investigation, there's a family dealing with unimaginable pain. For them, this isn't some mystery to be solved. It's a wound that has never, ever been allowed to heal.
And to really understand the depth of their grief, you have to know this wasn't the first daughter they had lost. Just 7 years before Alberta's murder, her sister Pam was killed. The guy responsible? He only served a few months in jail. So this family was already carrying this incredible burden of loss. So all of this grief, piled on top of the complete lack of answers from the police, it pushed Alberta's father, Lawrence, to his breaking point. One night, he took a gun from his fishing boot, he got in his car, and he drove to the house of the man police suspected, his own brother-in-law, Jack. But he didn't go through with it. He came back home, in tears, and he told his family that he felt like Alberta's spirit had stopped him, telling him, "No, Dad, this is not the answer." I mean, that moment just shows you the pure desperation, and also the incredible restraint of a family that's been absolutely shattered. Okay, so let's zoom out for a second, because while this is the story of one woman's life and her family's pain, it's also, unfortunately, part of a much larger, tragic pattern. It's a national crisis that has really only started to get the attention it deserves.
The hard truth is, Alberta Williams is one of thousands of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls in Canada. Her case really shines a light on the systemic issues and the terrible, disproportionate violence that Indigenous communities have been facing for generations. So why does this keep happening? Well, let's just look at a few of the numbers.
Think about this. In provinces like Manitoba, more than 3/4 of all children living on reserves are living in poverty. That's the backdrop for so many of these tragedies.
And get this, Indigenous people make up less than 5% of Canada's total population, but their children account for almost half of all the kids in the child welfare system. I mean, that disparity is just staggering.
And what does all this lead to? It translates to real-world outcomes. Higher infant mortality rates, lower life expectancy across the board. These aren't just statistics, they're symptoms of a really deep systemic problem.
But then, after years and years of silence, something shifted. A CBC podcast called Missing and Murdered investigated Alberta's case, and it brought her story to a national audience. And all of a sudden, the phone rang. It was the RCMP. They wanted to meet with the family again.
So the case was handed over to EPANA, which is a special task force that looks into unsolved cases along what's known as the Highway of Tears. And because of all this new public attention, an RCMP sergeant actually told the family that out of all his cases, Alberta's was now, quote, top on the list.
For Alberta's sister Claudia, this shift felt absolutely monumental. After decades of feeling like she was fighting for justice all alone, the secrets were finally coming out. The silence was broken, and for the first time in a very, very long time, there was this fragile bit of hope.
Which leaves us with this final, really crucial question. The public knows Alberta's story now. The police are actively investigating again. New information is coming to light. The book is finally open. But after all this time, will that final chapter finally contain the justice her family has fought so long for?